A new film is out that's shining a spotlight on what's being billed as a David and Goliath battle happening in South America. Crude documents the progression of a $27 billion lawsuit filed against Chevron on behalf of 30,000 citizens of the Ecuadorian Amazon. The suit accuses Chevron of dumping 18 billion gallons of oil and toxic waste into the Amazon rainforest of Ecuador, allegedly creating illnesses among residents who use water near the affected areas, causing many to leave their ancestral homes. Chevron, the defendant in the suit, denies responsibility for the contamination. It says Texaco, which subsequently it took over, was only a minority partner and didn't control what happened in the oil exploration and production, and that the government of Ecuador is trying to get out of its responsibility. Chevron declined an interview with Clean Skies News, but joining us now is Joe Berlinger. He is the filmmaker that is behind Crude. Joe, it's so nice to have you in.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much. It's a well-done film. Tell me, what made you first undertake this effort? What started this all?
Well, actually, I kind of got dragged into this kicking and screaming. I was told about this pollution case by one of the plaintiff's lawyers, by Stephen Donziger. He convinced me to go down and look at it, and I was just blown away by the pollution. I mean, it's just, you know, one of the big failings of Crude is its two-dimensionality. What struck me was the smell. Everywhere you turn is this horrible petroleum odor and these pits leaching petroleum waste into the rivers and streams, you know, where 5 indigenous tribes have made their homes for eons. And
now, one of the reasons you were kicking and screaming is because this had all started so long before your attention came to it.
Stephen was telling me about a 13-year struggle, and I thought to myself, well, I'm a cinema verite filmmaker. I like to film things in the present tense. I might have missed the story. But, you know, on the second day of our scouting trip, we went to a Kofan village. The Kofan are one of the indigenous people who are part of the lawsuit. And as I was getting out of my canoe and walking to a meeting with village leaders, I noticed a group of Kofan by the river preparing a meal, a communal meal using canned tuna fish, you know, the kind of cheap industrial tuna that you might get at some cheap restaurant supply company. And here we were deep in the heart of the Amazon rainforest where there should be fresh fish, and they were eating, you know, tuna fish from another part of the world because all the fish in the river were dead and diseased. And that image, more than anything, just spoke deeply to me that, you know, maybe this is not a film that I would normally make. Maybe there's not even a film here, but I just decided to return to Ecuador with a camera and bear witness because I felt it was, you know, there's been press coverage lately, but in 2005 when I started the film, this is a environmental catastrophe 30 times the size of the Exxon Valdez, and nobody was covering it. And I felt like for some reason the universe was tapping me on the shoulder saying, you're the guy to cover this.
It looks like it was.
Yeah.
Now, it really all, the lawsuit, which is the subject of Crude, the film, comes down to Chevron's culpability in the matter. And have you, in your research and your shooting of all this, become convinced of that 100%?
Well, you know what? Interestingly, to be honest with you, the lawsuit for me is an excuse to tell a larger story. I am not smart enough to know. I'm not a judge, I'm not a lawyer, I'm not a scientist. I'm not smart enough to figure out whether in the eyes of the law, in a strict legal definition of the law, whether Chevron is actually has enough excuses to prevail in the lawsuit. The film is about a much larger moral issue, and that is the system that was set up that is designed to pollute, that dumped toxic waste into the waterways for 30 years, there's no moral justification for that. You know, there are some mitigating.
No matter how the lawsuit comes out, whether it's the government, whether it's Petro Ecuador, whether it's Chevron.
There are a lot of mitigating circumstances, but something is not right. This is, you know, in most of the world, when you drill for oil and the crude comes up from the ground, it's mixed with what's called formation water, and that formation water has mixed with the oil for millions of years. That oil and water are separated. The oil goes to market. The water is supposed to be re-injected back into the dormant cavities of wells. Instead, to save some money, the plaintiffs allege that it was dumped directly into rivers and streams that feed the Amazon River, where these 5 indigenous tribes, well, it used to be 6, one's extinct, used to live off the river. Well,
you did a very good job in this film of showing both sides of this battle. I get the impression that you know, there was a very compelling video that shows judges, attorneys. I mean, everybody was out there on the site looking at the contamination sites. That was very compelling.
One of the just cinematically, it turned out to be such an amazing experience because, you know, in the United States, trials take place in courtrooms. Here, most of the trial actually took place in the field at these massive pollution sites, the kind of sites that would be, you know, fenced off and considered Superfund sites in this country, away from people. And yet you had lawyers from both sides arguing their case in a very dramatic way. It was incredible to watch it all happen right on the site. But one of the arguments of one of the lawyers was that this was a government-approved drilling area and people aren't supposed to be living there. Well, that's extreme prejudice towards indigenous people, and the government is not blameless in this situation. You know, a lot of these Latin American countries are ruled by Spanish oligarchies that kind of look down their noses at the indigenous people. I mean, to say that people shouldn't be living here, these were people who have been living here for long before the country of Ecuador was even in existence, and they've been living off the waterways. So your film, it's an unacceptable argument to make.
But your film, I mean, your film does a good job of showing both sides. But is there an agenda on your part to gain support and spread awareness of the plight of the Kofan people and others?
Absolutely. I'm not taking a position in the lawsuit, but I'm certainly taking a position on the plight of indigenous people. I mean, to me, multinational behavior in the extractive industries in third world countries, in places like Ecuador, whether it's legal or not, whether Texaco got a release from the government or not. The treatment of these people is just the same 700-year trend of white people treating indigenous people terribly, from the Spanish conquistadors to how we treated our own American Indian in this country, to now the 20th century, 21st century continuation of that trend in the form of eradicating where indigenous people live through extractive industries.
And the lack of funding of groups like this, is that part of the reason that it's films like this, it's media attention like this that can actually, that's about one of the only weapons that can help?
Well, you know, I've been making films for a long time, and I'm not naive enough to think films can change the world, but if it can open a few people's minds and hearts, that's the goal of this film.
So what's your best case? How do you see this turning out? Do you see it going on for years and years?
Well, one of the themes of the film is that actually the lawsuit, it's why I don't take an overt position in the lawsuit, because to me, one of the themes of the film is that these things take way too long. We're in year 17 of a struggle that's probably going to go on for another 10 years. Meanwhile, 3 generations of people are probably going to suffer and die. So the legal structures we have are inadequate for addressing these large-scale humanitarian and environmental crises. We shouldn't rely on a lawsuit to clean up the mess. We need to figure out as a society how to deal with these kinds of issues.
All right, no doubt. All right, Joe Berlinger of Crude, thank you so much for stopping by. Good luck with the film.
Thanks.